Last year I read an old story from the same book I'm going to read from tonight called Winter Book. Last year was the piece about Christmas Eve in Door. This book is dedicated to my, I should say, previous love of winter in Door County. I'm not sure about this year. It's going to be a little different. I had one other story in here that reflects Christmas memories, and then I'm all out of them. I don't know if we do this again next year. I'm going to have to write a new one. I'm going to talk about an old neighbor of mine. I wrote this about maybe 10 years ago or so. First time I'm ever reading it to an audience, so bear with me here. It's called Charlie's Christmas Gift. Little evidence remains that my old friend of some 40 years ago ever existed on the land next to me, though I think of him often in my walks around here. Charlie Root, an ordinary, everyday local, who lived a life most would describe as uneventful. Is the history of any man in a setting worth keeping? What remains to tell? And how much do we really see? Charlie lived with his wife Jenny on a back 40 across the road from Carl and Helen Carlson's, on 80 acres of woods and field where he and Jenny scratched out a living. They had no children. He farmed, fished, hunted, did odd jobs, making fish boxes, cutting ice from the lake, and died an old man, mostly poor, mostly humble, mostly satisfied. I was in Chicago celebrating Christmas when Charlie passed on December 29, 1973. A few relatives, friends, and neighbors claimed his tired old furniture, a few tools, an old gun, nothing of much value. I don't know what became of his crazy old winter clothes. He left me an antique corn seed planter, an old cultivator, a wagon wheel, some blue mason jars, a dozen cedar fence posts, the knowledge of where he hid maybe $100 in cash, and a secret of where the Christmas trees grew. The cash, hidden in the bathroom wall behind a tub faucet, disappeared when Charlie's house was razed and probably remains buried with all the other debris directly beneath the large house that the newcomer built, covering forever a small backyard history of one man's place and time, along with Jenny's flower gardens of orange and pink poppies as big as a man's fist, tulips and lupins and lilies, the old apple tree near the porch entrance, the purple and white lilac bushes out back, Charlie's homemade swamp cedar log birdhouses nailed to the tops of tall cedar poles stuck in the ground, and his old falling down garage. His land by now has been pretty much carved up and sold to strangers since his death. His life, little more than a memory to a handful of us now. What do the dead leave behind? And why should anyone remember or care where another man lived, what he did, or who he was? I miss his small white house far back in the field, the living room window lit up at night, the thought of him in his rocking chair, staring into the dark, listening to the radio, his dog happy at his feet. Remember all that is left. It is winter, late December. I'm on the road early, following a trail of tire tracks toward Charlie's place. We have work to do today. It has been snowing all night, and Charlie called at daybreak to say he snowed in. It's drifted so high against his door that he had to crawl through a porch window to find the shovel he left outside. There's a chuckle in the old man's voice. He loves snow. The deeper, the better. There's a pungent smell of wood smoke curling up white from Carlson's chimney against the winter sky. Pa Carlson is up early every morning feeding logs to the furnace, heating his whole house with wood as he did all his life, a life over 100 years now. I breathe the smell of wood smoke deeply, hold on to it with eyes closed, feel all the beneficence of holy incense, inciting the senses, no different than as a small boy on his knees in church, time passed, and a priest in golden vestment standing before him, swinging a censer, blessing the air of the faithful at morning mass. I make my way toward what I sense to be Charlie's gravel road, leading all the way back to the place, birch and maple on one side, open field and a few pine on the other, past the old logging trail, the barn, the garage, the apple tree, all of it, everything dressed in new snow, leading to Charlie's door, where he's already cleared a pathway to the porch. He's standing in the kitchen, a hatchet and saw on the table, pouring a cup of coffee, waiting for me. You want some coffee? Good thing the snow stopped. We should have gone last week. I suppose it ain't too bad in there yet. You got boots? It could be maybe deep. Charlie and the Christmas tree hunt. This became our ritual every winter in December, till he died, his way unacknowledged of giving something back for all he thought that I did for him. Don't buy a Christmas tree, tell me. Don't spend any money anywhere from somebody buying one. I got Christmas trees. We'll cut one for you. Balsam, so blue. Balsam's the best. And I'll show you where to find them. And remember now, so when I'm gone, you'll know where to go to get your Christmas trees. And then the old man would start dressing in his craziest outdoor winter in woods get-up I've ever seen. A layered arrangement which included a zippered navy blue sweater with moth holes over a flannel shirt over his long john undershirt, gray woolen pants that looked like riding breeches, a red and black woolen jacket, everything buttoned up to his neck, a brown woolen cap that sat straight on his head with furry flaps down over his ears, 2 pairs of gloves, one worn mustard-colored cotton work gloves pulled over a pair of brown woolen ones, and either old galoshes with metal clasps or a pair of black rubber boots with bright pink soles that lent an element of clownishness to his attire which could make a person smile. He carried a hatchet, a ball of baling twine in his hands, and God knows what else in his pockets, a knife for sure, wooden matches, and I seem to recall a bent, rusty nail. Then just before leaving the house, he'd put everything back on the table, reach into his pocket for the knife, and cut 2 pieces of baling twine. Bending down low, so bundled in clothes I feared he might totter, he proceeded to tie the bottom of each pant leg above the boot. You don't want to get no cold snow on your feet, he smiled, handing me the ball of twine, which I declined. A little cold snow on my feet didn't matter. I was dressed just fine. I grabbed the hatchet and saw, gave him the ball of baling twine, and we were off. Charlie leading the way down the same path of footsteps I made it to his door, only then to turn suddenly at the old barn, plod off into deep, fresh snow, and head straight into the woods down an old logging trail. I knew this route from my walks across his land in other seasons. Every turn, every tree, every view of pure woodland view afforded as it slowly carried me, rising and falling and twisting, inevitably down to a lagoon and small lake. I knew where the pileated woodpecker nested. I knew where the deer crossed the trail, where the wild mushroom grew. All of this thanks to Charlie. This had become my sanctuary, my own private worship place, wild in the woods. Whenever I left Door County for other parts of the country, other parts of the world, within a day of my return, I would take the road to Charlie's place, visit with him, then head alone down the trail through the woods, seek and find the age-old absolution of quiet, nature untrammeled, wending a way that led eventually to water. It was not a time or place to walk with anyone else or voice words. Words were a kind of trespassing on these grounds. Deep winter snow added yet another layer of silence, another dimension, both forbidden and inviting. You went there in the deepest snow, the worst winter weather, because you knew whatever might await you, there would be exhaustion and cold, but there would be something to carry back with you which made you feel different, better. Not unlike after an ice storm. Oh, the black branches lined in a nimbus of shimmering sunlight, a feeling of ecstasy. I tried not to lose sight of Charlie just ahead of me, amazed how a man in his 80s steadily made his way through the snow. He seldom paused, But there came what can be described best as a moment of awareness when the old man hesitated a second on the trail and then suddenly disappeared again before my eyes as he branched off and headed further and further into a pristine landscape of sculpted snow cover which felt rocky underfoot, a terrain of something like swales, small bluffs, slopes, ripples of limestone earth, branches, small growth, that hastened your pace in a downhill way, almost tumbling, cascading past beech, maple, birch, till you came up against some cedar trees, which you grasped to keep from falling, and into a concave opening where I would faintly detect a voice that sounded like a sigh or a whisper. Ah, there they are. Balsam. This one should do, he said, Charlie breathing, discovering, giving thanks. There was no celebration, only work, physical, that felt immediately like hot and cold exhaustion, the feet cold, leg and thigh muscles quivering from pushing and pushing through the heaviness of deep snow, the hips aching, the eyes teary, spittle frozen to the lips, standing, bending, kneeling. Now came the motion of sawing and chopping with all the strength that was left. Gloves off and on, sharp needles in our face, sticky sap on our fingers, knee-deep in snow, the tools slipping from frozen hands, fingers and hands numb as we began tying the branches with baling twine to make it easier to carry out. Pausing but a moment to inhale the sweetest, warmest scent of pine, a blessing from the cold earth. Neither the work nor the cold mattered then, just the scent of pine, the unexpressed joy of two friends working together, and the delight to Charlie's face. He had found a good Christmas tree, a tree to be adorned in tinsel and ornaments and lights in his neighbor's living room. And Charlie would be there to see the transformation and feel that all this lent meaning to his life. The way back was more difficult than the way in, though our trail, quite visible, would seem easier to negotiate, retracing our steps. But the physical strain of wading through snow, of seeming to climb drifts to reach a higher ground, had taken its toll. The tools hung from our hands like dead weight. We hefted, hoisted, carried carefully, dragged the tree through the deepest snow, muscles vibrating, breathing spent, arms falling off. What if the old man didn't make it? What if he dropped dead in front of me? How the hell would I ever get him out of here? But it was I who had paused in my tracks to catch a breath. It was my heart that I could hear pounding. Charlie was still going. Inside my winter clothes, my body was steaming. My short winter boots were filled with snow down to my toes. I paused to lean against the trunk of a large birch tree, traversing even the smallest hill just ahead, whatever the depth of snow, seemed impossible. It was beginning to get dark. This had taken far more time than either of us imagined. Where the hell was that trail? This was not the same way we came in. I took another step and fell to one knee. Charlie, too, tottered forward in a slow-motion fall, sinking first on both knees, then forward, flat on his chest, face in the snow. The bright pink soles of his boots looked back to me in alarm. Alarm, yes, but followed instantly and slowly by such an alien sound. Charlie pulling himself up, hand over hand, on the thin trunk of an ironwood tree, his hat buried, his glasses askew, full of snow, me trying to make my way quickly to help him, all the while thinking, this was enough. This was crazy. I was ready to abandon the whole Christmas tree escapade. I'd buy a tree in town from now on. But then, all I could hear in the white silence surrounding us was the sound of two men full of snow laughing, making a spectacle of themselves. Ain't this something? Charlie laughed. We made it back with a little light in the late afternoon, darkening sky. We left a tree outside his door and went in the house to dry our clothes on the oil stove in the living room. We drank hot black coffee at the kitchen table, sipped brandy from 2 milk glasses, and talked. I don't remember about what. The year after that, Charlie died, and I went back to cut a Christmas tree, as he told me, that I had every right to do after he was gone and after the land was no longer his. There was no snow on the ground that year. It took some time, but I found it, the place where the Christmas trees grew. But it was nothing like I knew or imagined it to be with Charlie. Then, 40 years later, just a few years ago, one gray afternoon in winter when I was sure I was the only one left on my road, the owners of summer places back at their homes in the city, my resident neighbors wintering in Florida, I impulsively made a dash from the road to the interior. I invaded private property, chained entrances, groomed pathways, gravel and black-topped inroads, no trespassing land where Charlie's Christmas trees grew. I searched all afternoon, every direction, and was both happy and sad to learn the place no longer exists. The trees were nowhere to be found. Thank you. I know Frances is in the room as well, and if you knew Frances and her sense of what the spirit was all about, I'm sure she's part of this and happy to be here. The idea for a Door County Poet Laureate was not mine. I'm pretty much against everything, as people know, so. But I thought, and I was pleased that somebody at least thought that maybe they ought to ask Blei what he thinks about this. And I thought, I wasn't too hot with the whole idea of Wisconsin Poet Laureate or Milwaukee. Pretty soon we'll have one for Gills Rock and Washington Island. But if we do so, that I think it would only be proper to honor Frances as the first one, since she worked so long and so hard, and poetry really was her entire life. And it would be nice to at least give the first award to her, and then follow up if they would want to do that every April during Poetry Month. And that's what we decided to do. I've written a lot about her. I was trying to put age brackets together a little bit when I came, as I was driving up here. I must have been in my 30s when I first met her, and Frances was in her late 50s at that point. What I didn't realize that she was 57 years old before her first book was published, which was Night Letters. So she was a late bloomer in many respects. And then again, she had been writing all her life since childhood, which will be reflected in some of the poems and comments, I'm sure, that will be mentioned today. So I'm happy that, and also, as much as I think, the awards and that kind of thing are good for a writer when they're first starting out, but they can become detrimental later on, and even like, which was what somebody who won the Oscar here recently said, it's like the death knell. What's going to happen after that? Later on in life, I think all you really want to do is write, and you realize that a lot of this other stuff is kind of nonsense. But Frances liked attention, and she was a member of all different organizations in the state, and she received many awards. So I know she'd be pleased as hell to know that she got this one, and it's her first one. The three major pieces I've done on her, the first one was in, actually the third Door book. I wish it had been part of the first, but one of the criticisms with Doorway was there weren't enough women in there. And that book came out about the time when the feminist movement was gaining power, and I didn't know her that well at that point either, but I did include her in this one, along with a number of other poets, and this is one of my favorites of the third, and it's the hardest one to find. It's been out of print a long time, but there are a lot about Frances in this first essay of hers, which I did of her, and a lot of her work, which was called The Summer I Was a Horse, which became then a book of hers later on. The second profile I did on her is in Winter Book, and it's called Frances in the Winter of Her Life. And those of you who knew something about her knew that when she was in her 80s, there was an opportunity, or whatever you want to call it, her son feeling that she probably should come live near him. The only problem was he lived in Alaska, and she was often in touch with him, and I knew that wasn't going to work from the beginning. I think she knew it as well, but that whole piece is about that experience, which was quite remarkable, because Frances was Frances May. She stayed so long and then finally said pretty much to herself, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going back home. I'm going back to Door County, which is what she did. So that tried to capture that. And then the third piece, which I'll still call a work in progress, and the only place it appeared, I thought, was in The Advocate, where at one point I was able to work with them, only because they asked me, hey, Frances died, would you do something about her? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So that's the piece I want to read from, because it's particularly poignant and related to what we're dealing with here. And it will be in the last book I do on the county, which I hope to finish while I'm still around, which will be, if I can make it, I'd like to get it out by next year. And that'll be kind of my swan song, and the swan song of a lot of people that are gone and that I've missed, and in some ways the county itself being gone from what it was. So this piece, which will be extended considerably, will appear in there. It's called Finding Frances, in memoriam, 1914 to 2004. She always said she wasn't going anywhere, even after she was gone for good. The supernatural came naturally to her. Hearing other voices, observing things no ordinary eyes saw, was all in a day's work, a poet's job, after all. Laughter came naturally to her, too, as well as feistiness, talking a person to death, and writing poetry that belonged to Frances May and no one else. I dubbed her Door County's unofficial poet laureate because she deserved it, because no one else did her the honors in a county more concerned with celebrating commerce than celebrating an authentic voice of its own. A little old lady from the wrong side of the bridge who devoted a lifetime to writing poetry about the sometimes sorry human condition, and freely sharing her time with anyone who showed an interest in making words sing. She loved young people and never turned down a chance to talk poetry with them at the local schools. She was one of those local poets who was beyond local, but nevertheless would wait a lifetime and then some to transcend the home boundaries, to be someday, perhaps, discovered in the greater world of wordsmiths out there. She received some community and a little statewide recognition, but never reached the audience she needed to put her and Sturgeon Bay on the map. She calls to mind another local poet from Wisconsin, Lorene Nidecker, 1903 to 1970, who now commands national attention, but once lived a solitary existence on Black Hawk Island, Fort Atkinson, her work barely known in her lifetime. Which is so often the poet's life, the way it goes, unless one's wired into the New York scene and or the universities. Frances had only Wisconsin writer-publisher August Derleth in her corner in her early years, Night Letters, 1971, and poet David Steingast, who edited her superb selected poems, Signposts, which was published in 1996, in her later years. Other than that, it was local fame only. I tried repeatedly knocking the doors down for her for the last 20 years or so, and have gotten so far nowhere. Frances and her work hardly exist in the big poetry world out there. The New Yorker certainly never knew her name, nor the premier magazine Poetry. The universities were essentially aloof, but for Edgewood College in Madison, which did give her essentially the time of day at least once. Where the hell was Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin anyway? And who cared a hoot or a holler about some little old lady, bag lady as she sometimes saw herself, either putting lines of words down perfectly into a number of classic forms or breaking the rules entirely to let the real music and meaning flow, writing about herself, her husband, the family, or Michigan, which she would never get out of her bones. Childhood in Michigan, parents, sisters, aunts, uncles, friends, romance, writing it all down from beginning to end. Barflies, whores, preachers, buried secrets, all her particular forte. Married life in Wisconsin, new friends, an uncompromising singular life. The poet stuck deeper and deeper in a dark cave of a house on Joliet Avenue, settled in for the long haul, writing the time away. In her later years, a sudden change in residence, uprooted from her habitat, her place by the living room window, her old manual typewriter, her large interior view of a small world, an insular life, mainly in memory and books and writing poems to explain it. Left for a long flight then, at the age of 81, that was on November 2nd in 1995, flew to Anchorage, Alaska, where her son and family beckoned her to come live out what was left of her life, but where she did not remain very long. Neither family nor Alaska could contain the poet's fighting spirit, her precious need to live out her life on her own terms, as she sensed the door closing too soon and hopped the return flight home to stay with an old friend, Martha Lambiata, for a while before settling into a sad, little, low-income apartment on Colorado Place, where her life was pretty much reduced to the telephone and writing poetry day and night. She filled a notebook after notebook by hand at this point, having pretty much given up the typewriter, fiercely facing the ossification of old age, till finally the last stop, withering but still writing away in a clean, bright little room at the Cornerstone Care Center on Duluth Avenue. Happy and as engaged as one could be in the diminishing circumstances of less is less, the pencil falling from her white, wrinkled fingers that could no longer hold what she still had to say, her time just about used up. She almost made 90. Her poetry both less and more complex in the final months, all of it with more than a touch of irony, wry humor, and a continued fascination with time. It will take another 50 years or more before they resurrect the bright old bones of Frances May and her poems, but she'll be waiting, anxious to continue the conversation of one Midwestern woman, one long life, and many finely wrought poems to tell that living true and deep is everything, and obscurity is hindsight. "No siree," she'd say, "you're never getting rid of me." And then she'd smile, fold her arms in front of her in that unmistakable, unsinkable Molly Brown attitude, lift her head in a comic, snooty way, and give out that cackle of a laugh she was famous for. "I might even haunt you, Norbert. You'll see. But don't be afraid." And then the laughter once again. And one night, less than a week after her death, I pulled a book from the shelf of used books for sale at the Sister Bay Library. The book was the collected poems of Theodore Rothke. I turned the cover, and there she was, in my face, Frances May, the name underlined, written in Frances's unmistakable handwriting. Goose pimples. So it's come to this, the dismantling of the old poet's library, I said to myself. "They're spreading you around, Frances." I sensed her laughter over my shoulder. I knew her for more than 30 years, spent hours and hours with her, but Rothke's poetry never came up in our conversation. There's so much we don't know about anybody when we think we know it all. So what am I going to do with you, Frances, without you? What really went on with you? I bought the book of Rothke's poems even though I have it. I bought it without Frances' signature of previous possession. And a week later in Milwaukee, rummaging through the used poetry shelf at Harry Schwartz's bookstore on Downer, I pulled a thin, cream-colored spine of a book from a shelf tightly jammed with other books of poetry, never realizing what I had in my hands until I saw The Poet's Cat by Frances May, 1990, on the front cover. Frances again. "So how do you like them apples?" was one of her favorite old lines. I smile. She must be enjoying this. I've written a number of pieces about Frances through the years, published them in newspapers, magazines, and books, presented portions of her life and work before groups and on stage. I edited and helped publish her book, The Summer I Was a Horse. I taught her in my writing workshops. I brought her to the clearing as a guest artist innumerable times to inspire both beginning and advanced writers. Once, she was in Alaska then, I took her story to the airwaves on Warren Nelson's Wisconsin Public Radio program, Big Top Chautauqua, where I told about her life and read a number of her poems, including the entertaining Satisfaction Guaranteed, where she sends for a man from the L.L. Bean catalog, and the toughest, most thought-provoking poem she ever wrote, both a cry and a song to her own sense of self, The Gift, with the unforgettable opening line, "I don't know anybody," and the equally adamant closing line, "I belong to myself now. I wait on you because I will, and I don't owe you anything." There's no end to the stories I could tell about Frances, or all the poems of hers still out there. But let me tell you about the last time I brought her to, I visited her. I brought her to the clearing class. That was about the mid-'90s, and how her storytelling, she loved to talk even more than read poems, as you well know, some of you. Her storytelling got longer and more hilarious, more convoluted than ever. She was on a roll and had my writing students eating out of her hand. I was afraid she would never get to reading her work. But finally, near the end of a long session, she removed a wrinkled piece of what looked like parchment paper from her notebook, held it in one hand, and began to read. About 2 lines into the poem, the paper began to tremble uncontrollably in her hand. And the poem, the voice, the face, the body, the whole desk, the whole room seemed to be shaking. It was heartbreaking to witness. Frances had suddenly grown old. She was in her early 80s at this time. But of all the stories still to be told, let me tell you about Frances's last birthday, how I surprised her at the nursing home, the Cornerstone, on September 21st, 2003, her 89th birthday. How I knocked on the partially open door to her room with flowers and a card in my hand. She was sitting in her chair in a blue robe covered with a blanket. Her hair had grown longer and was not combed. She looked disheveled. How thin and faded she had become, how fragile. I planted a big kiss on her cheek. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. "Happy birthday." She lit up immediately with a smile and a laugh. "I knew you'd come today," she exclaimed. "It's too bad I'm an old lady," she cackled, "or I'd been after you a long time ago." And immediately got into one of her long memories of good times, good men, bad men, how all the men were after Frances all the time, and oh, she loved to dance. "I was a redhead," she reminded me. "On fire," I said. "You bet, fire red hair," she replied. More laughter. It was already late morning. I was in no hurry. This was her day, and I was prepared to put in a long session of just listening to her, enjoying many of the same stories I've heard for 30 years, occasionally with a fascinating new digression. After an hour, I sensed she was running out of steam, and I tried to move the conversation to the subject of the poet in old age. Though I had continued to collect countless notebooks of her handwritten poems the past few years, bringing her new notebooks with each visit, I was aware that her handwriting was growing fainter, more spidery, more difficult to read. Time was catching up. But the saddest revelation that day of her birth was the realization that the poems had finally stopped coming. There were no notebooks, no pens, no pencils in sight. "I had a pencil in my hand before I went to school," she told me. "I tried writing a couple of times lately, and the thing that did it isn't there." Well, I feel challenged. Life is, well, we walk around in this skeleton, and the real person is inside. The real person is who you're stuck with. I just can't be. I think myself now a non-entity. I just can't be non. but I can't do it anymore. My body won't work. The poetry part of me was my hands, and I don't have it anymore because it's not there. I'm now in the real world, a very real world. The best thing I have now are friends, and you're on the top of my list. I don't remember the last poem I wrote. Where is the black notebook? I don't know. They probably threw it out. I've declined my brain. That's true, and I'm admitting it to myself. Maybe there is such a thing as hell. Just like that, she said, looking at her old hands. This is me now, all wrinkled up. With poetry, you see, I had some place to escape to. It wasn't the words, it was the feeling. Where did it go? I have to force myself with a pencil, and the energy I need to write is used up forcing to push the pencil. I tried a few times, but the poetry's no good. I want honesty in my writing. I can't put my whole self into it anymore. If there's someone or somebody who planned this for my life, that's hard to believe that it could affect me in this way, slow me down for nothing. It's a lot harder for me. My voice is fading, but you know, I've talked for a long time, and we both broke into laughter at this point. A staff person poked her head in the door to say that it was time to eat, time for her birthday party. Would you like to join her, she asked me. Of course, I replied. I helped Frances into her walker, and then she and I shuffled out of the room, down the hall, into the dining room together. There were 9 elderly people scattered at various tables. 2 balloons were tied to a chair. As we approached the table, Frances announced to one and all, "Hello, everybody. I've got my boyfriend along here. I'm not dead yet," she laughed. I can't sit around and complain, she told me at the table. I'm well taken care of. You learn humility here. I don't think for a minute that they gave me special attention. Dinner is served. There are 2 thin slices of an orange on her plate, 2 Ritz crackers, 2 thin slices of cold cuts, and a cup of chicken noodle soup, a favorite. Her birthday dinner request. For as long as I've known her, taken her to breakfast and lunch, she hardly ever touches her food. Talking was always more important than eating. She swallowed 2 spoons of her chicken soup. A birthday cake was presented in her honor. She tried to blow out the candles. A few residents and a staff person began singing happy birthday, ending with the traditional, how old are you? And in the dead silence of the last verse, Frances shouted loud and clear, I'm 21. When I'm gone, you won't forget me, Frances laughed. That's an old song. I used to play that on the old Victrola back home. And then she began to sing it. The party was soon over. The residents shuffled back to their rooms. We sat in the comfortable afternoon silence of the room, just being there, long pauses between our conversation. It was time to go. Suddenly she grimaced in sharp pain. Her head snapped back. She closed her eyes and tightened her lips. Her face became a death mask. Frances, I clutched the old hands in her lap, felt her long, cold, white fingers. She straightened up, shook off whatever pain momentarily possessed her. She would have none of it, and continued, I'm old, Norbert, and decrepit. Decrepit. It's a very ugly word. There was a long pause. I believe your lifestyle determines whether you live a long life or a short one, followed by another long pause. I don't make up anything. It's the way it is. And I gave her the last word. Whatever's written in the book, there's more left unsaid. We are all actors in a big play. My life has been like one of those old novels where there was something they were trying to prove, and it's true, it doesn't always turn out well. That's the Frances I remember. Christmas Eve in Door. It's a different holiday in many ways. The absence of snow for one, and the fact that this is my first Christmas Eve in Door after years of living here. My Christmases have all been Chicago Christmases, shopping in the Loop, the neighborhood, the suburban malls, and Chicago's magnificent mile. Christmas Eve at my parents', French fried shrimp from a local deli, homemade bakery, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and in my early days, midnight mass. Christmas Day with my in-laws in their neighborhood right next door to mine. If the truth be known, a death in the family has altered things a bit. Christmas was to be moved to another location, the burden of memories eased, but I remained behind. And if the truth be known, for years now, the specialness of this season has meant less and less to me. Christmas was best as a child, and then as a father of small children. Now I find it impossible to muster the expected enthusiasm. If the truth be known, I relish solitude a good part of the time. 4 p.m. and I'm finished with the words, the people, the places I've been imagining on paper for the day. I turn down the heat in the coop where I work and close up shop, trudge into the house through a sharp wind and cold rain. I turn the kitchen light in an empty house and the dog shaking herself free from an afternoon slumber. This will be a Christmas Eve of my own making. An extra treat for the dog, more seed for the late afternoon birds at the feeder, and later some apple pie for myself, I decide, turning on the oven and putting it in. I light the Christmas tree and put on some carols sung in Italian, feed the dog, the fish, the bird, making believe it's a Christmas Eve. Everything so far this afternoon heightens the prospect of an evening to be celebrated alone. I can read, I can listen to some good music, watch some TV, start on that apple pie. The possibilities of a long and peaceful night seem endless. Yet, a restlessness persists, the urge to do something else first, and then let there be music and wine and apple pie and the dwindling hours of night. Aside from my love of walking, my restless nature of getting up and going somewhere, I can instantly dream up any excuse imaginable to get in the car and just drive the country roads. There's a peace for me there that I cannot explain. And why not now on Christmas Eve in Door? I fill a thermos with coffee and head out on a makeshift Santa Claus mission of my own, bearing gifts for no one, just the joy of self, of the moment of the countryside, a spontaneous plunge into a Door Christmas Eve of my own discovery. North down Timberline, past the darkened houses of Matt Dobner and Mike Hill, night of no Christmas light. Colored lights on some houses, more splashes of them here and there, while moving on now toward Gills Rock. Gills Rock, stone cold dead, abandoned, no sign of a Christmas Eve ferry to Washington Island, no sign of Christmas, save down on the dock where I park and where the white-capped waters of the bay lick the pier deliciously with ice, where 3 fishing tugs swing gently on lines in their slip, one of them with a Christmassy green hull named Faith 2. Back in the car then, heading north or heading south, down 42 now, a familiar stretch of Gills Rock houses clustered around the top of the thumb, giving way then to farms and rural countryside. Rounding the curve past the Fitzgeralds, the Hartman House, the Coopers, all the windows ablaze, Sid Telfer Sr. and Inez tucked there in the woods, the old Ellison Bay schoolhouse, the clearing gate open for a winter's welcome. Then I left past the post office, past Gus Klinke's house, the trunk of his Buick B-mobile wide open, appropriately enough. I would not be surprised to see Gus bent over, rummaging there in the dark, looking for some long-forgotten part. And on the corner, his worn and fading white garage, propane tanks, old stoves, power moors, odds and ends to in rusted glory, and one gas pump. All of it now aglow in colored Christmas lights. Gus' holiday greeting, in a way, from my house of everything imaginable to yours. A curious old-fashioned Christmas card, almost surreal, come to life, unexplainably beautiful. Those lights will shine, very likely, all through this night and the next and on into spring. In the heart of Ellison Bay, I am briefly surprised to see Newman's Pioneer Store open on Christmas Eve, but then again, there has never been a night, a time, or a need when the old Pioneer Store has let me down. For this, many of us are thankful. A loaf of bread, a dozen eggs, some good cigars. Newman's is open, and there's Lester or Carol or the two of them at the old wooden counter, quietly playing cribbage, quietly minding the store. I thought you might be closed tonight. People have been calling. I buy some bacon to go along with a Christmas morning breakfast of Uncle Tom's pancakes. Getting back into the car, I waved to Harvey Sheriff Olson, just crossing the road on a Pioneer Christmas Eve shopping errand of his own. The drive then from Ellison Bay south is relatively unmarked by Christmas, except for the decorations of the Hanson house on top of the hill. The main drag of Sister Bay is a study in stillness, not a car, not a soul, only the beautifully lighted trees on the telephone poles. The goats have left the side roof of Al Johnson's for Bethlehem, leaving the tiny wooden reindeer with quizzical faces to watch the Sister Bay night. And when the lights are out in Husby's, there must be something stirring. I proceed with caution toward Ephraim. There's a star hanging over the old Anderson store and another on the Ephraim Village Hall, where two red bells toll soundlessly in the wind. Just up the hill on a Christmas Eve, on a winter night of no ice cream at Wilson's, the stained glass windows of the Moravian church, a scene reminiscent again of an early American Christmas, where the white bright church steeples of Ephraim hover over a traditional Christmas Eve, the stained glass aglow while a steady stream of worshipers in cars move up the hill for the evening service. Soon carols will calm the mind and the churning waters of the harbor on this holy night. I could go back at this point, but instead I continued toward Fish Creek, the road very dark once again. Christmas has pulled back into the villages and farms far from the road, leaving woods and fields and darkened summer houses till Fish Creek itself appears, where people are gathering at the Catholic Church, and a single magnificent Christmas decoration hangs above the street like a canopy of red and gold and light. Beyond it is darkness, desolation. Fish Creek is gone till spring. As I return toward Ephraim, unsure just what direction I might steer next, a light in the sky catches my eye. The star? No. A beacon, though, a light of the east and the west, north, south. It's the light of the Ephraim Airport, scanning the skyline, circling the low heavens, bouncing over an impenetrable layer of clouds. I follow it only to find an abandoned airstrip, a night of no departures, no arrivals, an empty phone booth, 7 deserted cars, and 1 plane touched in Christmas red. The tiny blue-white lights of Ephraim sparkle across the bay, a beautiful scene in all seasons. I veer to the right, up past the Moravian, singing that eve of Christmas away, turning, climbing County Q, east toward Highway 57, and then suddenly south, further still into Bailey's Harbor, which is empty, the entire town, but for the Emmanuel Lutheran Church and a street filled with cars. On to my favorite back roads now, all the way home, turning at Paul's Glass Bar, County EE, then a right onto County F, and further ahead, leaving F to snake my way down Town Line Road. I pass Freddie Kadanko's house and wonder about him and Christmas Eve. Is the polka music playing? Does he dance alone around a tree? Is there a tree? Are his cats watching? Then past Judd Elquist, an old and good friend. How many Christmases now has he been gone? The warm times shared with him and Florence, in all seasons, laughter, drink, fishing stories, and good food. I slow down past the picture window and catch a glimpse of Flossie alone in a dim living room, looking out upon the darkness, seeing perhaps only the lights of a solitary car drifting by. Crossing County Q, nearing 42, and passing a house that will always be Bill Beckstrom's place to me. A memory of a finely crafted home, a comfortable living room, and stone fireplace. Bill, slouched in a chair, pulling on a cigarette, running a hand through his gray hair, talking plants or talking books or ideas with a friend, or just there reading alone, lost in a labyrinth of music, a Dvorak symphony, no doubt, where his living was best and nearly perfect. East now toward Sister Bay, picking up 57 again past the patio drive-in, cutting off onto Orchard to turn left on Old Stage, and just ahead from here to Ellison Bay, home free. Old Stage curving now, north Main mostly, a long stretch of night and no Christmas. The farm spreading further apart now. The mind wanders, loses sight, and I reflect now on all the Christmases I have never known, but hope to someday see. A Christmas in Rome, or Christmas in Eastern Europe, or Mexico, or Santa Fe. I recall a midnight mass described to me on the Santo Domingo reservation, and how the rites of both cultures, Native American and Christian, come together on that night. The candles burning, the hymns, the chants, the crucifix, the Christ child. Then down the aisle, as my friend described, imagine Indians, the dancers, dressed in buffalo heads. That image so overwhelms me that when I look for the familiar outside, I realize that nothing seems the same to me, that for the first time, and here of all places, I am lost. Did I turn off Old Stage for some reason? I follow the road and find myself on Water's End, on Lake Michigan, where a solitary fishing tug, Hope no less, rests this night of all nights. Those images of the Southwest still flash through my mind, and I think of yet another man, one of the poorest men in Door that I have known, the old migrant Ignacio Charlie Gonzalez, picturing him cramped in his small trailer tonight, wondering how his Christmas Eve might be. Rabbit and pinto beans, a small tree, or maybe nothing more than sleep. I ply the back roads once again just to know he is somewhere there and safe. From Water's End to 42, then back to Z, where is he anyway? Darkness, darkness everywhere. Cat's eyes glowing in the darkest ditch, and then a cluster of buildings which might indicate Ignacio's place, and then, yes, of course, there it is, his tiny trailer. What a sight I am not prepared for. Ignacio's trailer, his small, small world, decked out in Christmas lights. A light in the little window, the shadow of him safe inside. And this, perhaps, my greatest joy tonight. All roads lead eventually to Ellison Bay from here, including Mink River Road, which takes me past the house of old Oscar Diestert, moving slowly through the living room this night, past Gus Clanky's garage once again, the blue-white neon clock glowing in the window, forever it seems, 8:45, more or less. Approaching Timberline, a string of colored Christmas lights brightens the front porch of Robert Quayler's place. A light always on, of course, at Uncle Tom's old Newport school. Turning left, darkness. Turning right, home. I make coffee, cut the apple pie, slice some cheddar cheese, light the Christmas tree, and put on the 3 albums of classical guitar, sip wine, and open a present that I have given to myself, the letters of D.H. Lawrence. Lawrence says at one point, the great thing is to love, and therein lies the excitement. the fundamental vibration of the life force. I read in and around a stack of other books, listen to Dylan Thomas reading A Child's Christmas in Wales, answer the phone, the Roushes extending their greetings from Western Spring, Illinois, then turn on the TV to catch John Paul II's Mass from Rome, just for old time's sake, just to see St. Peter's Basilica once again, just to hear the Latin, the music, to witness the splendor of a ritual I once celebrated as a child, a ritual which intrigues me still, but in very different ways. I think of my family in other places. I think of friends spread out in so many directions. I think of my own journey in place this Christmas Eve in Door. I think not so much of Christmas as spirit, alive in everyone, in all seasons, in all places, in how it flickers in the darkest recesses imaginable. I think of my work to find the people, the place, the time, the words and forms to say these things for all, yet make them mine. Call it Christmas, call it spirit, call it love, call it light. In the midnight hours, I read a Hopi incantation and turn to sleep. The day has risen. Go I to behold the dawn. Go, behold the dawn. The white rising, the yellow rising, it has become light. And on Christmas morning, on the road, a clarity of sky, a gift of sun. Thank you.